Yeah, looks great. Hey, Andrew, how are you?
Good.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, of course.
I ask everyone, what does it mean to be Vietnamese?
I think it's, recognizing, where your family came from, respecting your elders, understanding your culture, understanding your traditions, and importantly, recognizing the fact that, especially as a son of Vietnamese immigrants, that we have opportunities here that a lot of other people in our, over in Vietnam don't. And so, to take advantage of that and to also always remember to kind of give back to the community and do what we can to be a good person and make a difference.
What inspired you to become a lawyer?
As a kid growing up, I heard the refrain of, you know, go into medicine or go into law or go into engineering. Again, my parents came over from Vietnam with nothing, and they wanted to make sure that I had opportunities that they didn't. And one of those things was to kind of try to get me to start thinking about fields that um, they believed were stable job fields and also things that are interesting, right? And as a kid, my mom was a secretary or assistant at a law firm, a small law firm here in Houston, and visiting her at work, getting to meet some of the lawyers. I thought they were cool people, and I thought they were um, they looked like they enjoyed what they were doing. And obviously, I'm a kid, so I don't really I'll probably think that about any field if I visit people at work. But
Yeah.
over time, my high school had career day where they would send you off to different fields to try to shadow people and get a feel for what they're about. And it kind of just always stuck with me that I was either going to go into law or medicine. So when I actually went to University of Texas at Austin for undergrad, um, I started off as biochemistry, and I just didn't have that passion for those classes. And so what I did was I switched to economics and being able to kind of take different classes and whether it be government or political science, those type of things. It started gearing me up for doing essentially a path towards law school. So that's kind of the shorthand version of how I got to law school. But it's something that's been building up over the years. I'd always had that interest for either medicine or law, and I think when I got to college, it really crystallized that law was the direction that I wanted to go.
Hmm. What kind of law do you practice today?
So I'm a litigator. So I practice in the field of civil litigation, and that involves a lot of different things. Um, for me personally, my docket has cases ranging from serious injury and death cases, maritime and admiralty, product liability, commercial litigation. There's really a wide array of cases, and those are cases that need to be litigated, which is basically you're not just doing paperwork, but you have hearings in the courtroom, you have depositions, you have workup and preparing for trial, you have appeals, and so it's a field that keeps me going every day. I really love what I do, and I think it's the right fit for me.
Yeah. Um, I hear this all the time. We as parents, and or I'm a parent, and the previous generations, we talk highly of doctors and lawyers, and we love having that in our community. But how important is it to have Vietnamese lawyers in the U.S.?
I think it's very important. I think it's important for minorities to have representation in every job field. I think diversity is extremely important. I'm fortunate to live in Houston, where Houston's a real true melting pot. We have an African American mayor, We have minority judges, Asian American, African American judges on the bench. We have people of all races representing us in government at various levels and in different fields. And I think that it's always important for diversity to be present. And I think that's no different in the field of law. In the field of law, you have people that are representing other people and other businesses. So it's important that we exist in this space where we can, represent either other fellow Asian people. As you know, there are a lot of people over here that either have a language barrier or, other circumstances that, keep them in a bubble. And so you have, people that don't know who to reach out to. And the first people they think of are people that are the same nationality as them. And it may be comforting to, let's say, an older Vietnamese family that needs help to know that there are Vietnamese lawyers out there. I mean, that's just one example, but it goes a lot deeper than that. I think that we have to continue to permeate the industry because Asian American representation in our field is extremely low. And, lawyers do so much. Lawyers represent people and businesses on a day to day basis, but they also become judges. They also become your representatives and your senators in government. And if you have a low number of Asian Americans in the field, consequently, you have a low number of Asian Americans in government and on the bench. And you can see that if you just look across the country, how many Asian American senators are there? How many Asian Americans representatives are there? How many Asian American um, Court of Appeal justices or federal judges are there? Right? There's not a lot, and these are people that shape policy. These are people that shape statutes and laws. And from the lawyer perspective, being in our field, what I do litigation wise, you're basically litigating cases based on what the laws are and what the courts are deciding. And there's some laws that are black and white in terms of exactly what they say, and some have reasonable interpretations of it. And so you have a situation where in court, you have a chance to affect case law, right? In terms of
Yeah.
how courts are viewing things, how you advocate on behalf of your client. It may be only confined to that case in a lot of instances, but in some instances, it may be viewed by other courts as something that they need to look at, right? So, like when we're in court, we're arguing cases and hearings. You're referring to what other courts have decided, right? You say, judge, well, the Fifth Circuit ruled on this similar issue in 2018 in this case, or the Court of Appeal said this, or the Texas Supreme Court said this. Well, obviously the courts are reviewing those decisions and issuing holdings, but who's arguing those cases, right? There are
Yeah.
people are in those cases arguing the facts and arguing their best interpretation of the facts and the law in those cases and the application to their own specific circumstances. And how well they do may affect how other courts, decide. And so it's very important for us to have people that of all minorities um, in the legal field, because I think that we bring so many different perspectives, and um, I think it's something that's necessary.
When I think of a litigator, I think of somebody who needs to be visually tip top, somebody who needs to be presentable. My eyes and my optics as somebody in the courtroom will shape my opinion about the case. I think, right? I'm just thinking out loud as a civilian, somebody who's on the
Right.
outside. Is there a is there a benefit, or is does it work against you? Like if I'm Vietnamese and I roll up into the courtroom with a Vietnamese attorney or litigator representing me, do you think sometimes that it's a powerful signal that I have somebody who's bright, somebody who's very capable of doing their job and they're representing me? Or do you think from a white American perspective, it's like, oh, okay, these are two Asian guys. I mean, or two black guys, or you know, the is it skewed? Is the
I mean, yeah, so the second part of your question, I'll tackle that first because I think it really relates to what we just talked about, which is representation. And I think it's important to have more Asian Americans in the litigation field because right now, like you said, there's not a lot of, I'll just say there's not a lot of Asian American litigators. And so, you know, the more that we get people into the field, the more we'll be taken seriously. And it is something where I think, appearance is important to some extent, but that's only a small part.
Hmm,
I think that a lot of it is how you practice and the reputation you create yourself for yourself. The legal community is pretty small. It's large, but it's small. I mean, I think you probably get what I mean by that.
yeah,
But you know, how you practice and your skill level and your grasp of the subject matter is so important. And once you start your career and once you start practicing as a lawyer, um, how you practice and the results you get and the job you do for your clients will speak for itself. So if you go into the courtroom and you have an Asian American litigator or a white litigator or Hispanic litigator, whatever, I don't think that really matters as much. More so than the reputation that that specific lawyer has in that legal community, right? Because if a firm draws you on a case where you're on the other side and you're representing someone that they're adverse to in a case, they're more so, I think, concerned about what's this guy about? You know, has he been doing this for a while? What are his results? Is he aggressive? Is he not aggressive? Is he going to push the case or is he just going to sit on it and not do much? What is this guy about? And I think maybe part of it also is like, if you have some, you know, older partner from some international law firm walk in the courtroom, is there some clout there? Yeah, of course. But, the lawyers in Houston, no matter what firm you're at and what law you do, I mean, a lot of lawyers here can go toe to toe with anybody. So it doesn't matter what firm, it doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter, necessarily, what your client book looks like. Once you get in the courtroom, um, anything can happen,
yeah,
right? And so, you have younger attorneys and less seasoned attorneys prevail over older lawyers all the time in court hearings, right? Um, it just I think it's a mix of a lot of factors. Um, I think it's just important to really, regarding who you're choosing to represent you, it's important to choose someone that one that you can kind of talk to. Communication is so important, right? Are you guys on the same page? Does your attorney who's advocating for you, does he understand what you want and what your goals are in the case? Is he listening? Second, does he actually have knowledge in the subject area that you're looking to have him or her represent you for, right?
yeah,
Um, there are a lot of people that you know there are people sometimes that take cases that they don't necessarily have the experience um, or the bandwidth to handle.
yeah,
And that's fine if you're going to bring other people on board as well. You have a lot of firms that do that, right? Sometimes let's say, you're an attorney that represents someone in one matter, and they want you to help them in some other matter, and you say, you know what, it's a little bit out of what I do regularly, but you can bring someone else on board, right? Um, I mean, that's different, but I think it's important for you to ask, you being, if you're someone looking for an attorney, to ask them what their experience and what their practice areas are on a regular basis. I think it's important because when that attorney is showing up for you in court, I mean, you want him or her to know what they're doing,
Well,
right?
here's the problem, right? So I hire an attorney, and attorneys are very smart people. Typically, they're very presentable, and I talk to, let's say, 5 lawyers. And how do I know I'm getting a quality lawyer? A, and how do I know once I think that I have a quality lawyer that that lawyer is going to perform the way I want to? And because by the time I get to the courtroom, isn't it a little late because I've made this assessment? How do I
Yeah.
know I'm getting what I want?
Well, I mean, kind of one thing is just look at how they market themselves. That would be one thing, right?
Mm,
So go to their website, see what their results are. You have firms that will list their results. I mean, my firm lists our results, not all of them, but we list a good amount of results on our page. So you can kind of see that we're doing things in different areas, right? That we're not just taking cases, sitting on them and settling them right away, right? We actually have things to talk about, whether it be, cases in different fields, or cases that are getting recognition, or, cases that are going to trial, or cases that are being appealed and coming down one way or the other. So I think it's important when you're doing your research is to see, you know, what those results are. Like if you're looking, for example, for a family lawyer, I think it's a little bit more. Um, I think it's a little bit more simple in terms of what you're looking for. Again, marketing and the firm's reputation is important. Obviously going through the lawyer's page and seeing that they're actually active and they're actually handling certain things. But let's say you have a very narrow issue, right? Let's say you're a offshore worker that gets hurt in an oil rig, um, at sea, and so if you're hiring a lawyer to do that, to represent you for some injury claim, it would be good for you to know whether or not your lawyer has actually handled that type of issue
right.
before. Right now, that doesn't mean that they're not capable of handling that. So again, I mean, everyone has to start somewhere, right? But you know, your lawsuit is your one chance
Yeah.
at something. That's your one chance. Let's say you think you got wrongfully terminated, or let's say you got someone gotten in a terrible accident or a tragic accident, or you have some you know contract that got breached, and there's substantial damages. That's your one chance to remedy a wrong, or to defend yourself against a wrong if you're on the adverse side. So you want someone that's handled that issue before, and not just handled it like handled one case, but has experience and can talk knowledgeably about all those issues. You we hear things like bet the company litigation, where like a company's future hangs in the balance. You have firms deal with big contracts and things like that. But I mean, everything should be a bet the individual, bet the company
Yeah.
litigation, right? Because, like, let's say someone gets in a, you know, um, or horrific, work accident, and some loved one gets electrocuted, and you know, there's amputation or paralysis, or some other serious, condition that results from let's say a construction site accident or a refinery accident. Well, that's that person's future, right?
Yeah.
That's how they're going to care for themselves in the future. Or they can get enough money for medical bills, or they can get enough money to kind of get them in some sort of similar position that they were beforehand. I mean, that's not the time to hire someone that your friend just knows, or that's not the time to just hire someone that it has an office down the street from you and is convenient. You know, Again, that doesn't mean that those people can't handle it. but sit down with them and have consultations. A lot of lawyers offer free consultations, and some offer them at a small, fee. Sit down with several lawyers. I always encourage people, like, you got to hear what's out there.
Yeah.
You can't just, you don't just, like your buddy tells you something, or you happen to drive by the office earlier in the day and you say, you know what, it's close to me, I'm just going to go in, right? Do your research, talk to them, ask them what experience they have in that field, and also do your research. Go online, look at their website, look at the results, word of mouth, reviews, all sorts of things, right? So I think it's important when you're choosing a lawyer to do what you can. You're right. There's some things that you may not find out. I mean, there's some things that there are lawyers that may either, exaggerate their experience, or on the other hand, there may be some incredibly accomplished lawyer that decides not to post any of his results. But, you know, at least if you put the effort in on your end to do that research, then you've done the best that you can to
Right.
find out. And so it's something that I think a lot of people need to do more. And it's the same thing. If I was to look for a lawyer, and it's different because I'm in the field, right? So I have already idea of who handles what.
Right.
So
Right.
if you ask me, for example, I don't do labor and employment. If you ask me for a labor and employment lawyer in Houston, I can name you several good ones, very accomplished and very skilled lawyers, um, that you should consult with, right, and sit down with. And but if I wasn't in the legal field, how else would I find that out? I mean, I would have to ask around. I would have to do research. But I wouldn't just hire someone, right? That I don't know anything about, unless I've sat down with them and I've heard them tell me kind of all those things that will answer some of my questions.
Yeah. You had probably different paths in terms of, starting your own firm, working for a big firm, going into government. What, as a lawyer, what are the things that kind of affect that decision? Or personally for you, how has, the path that you chose arrived for you?
Well, so right now I'm a partner at a firm here in Houston. And before that, I worked at two previous firms. I've worked at, what people would consider boutique to medium sized firms, and I've worked for a large firm. So, they're all different in certain ways, right? You have, um, you know, the medium sized to larger firms have a lot of other, a lot of people at the top making certain decisions, and there are a lot of more complexities on a day to day basis. I think at a boutique to medium sized firm, you have, and again, this is just my experience, but I think you have more, office camaraderie. You have more, um, you're closer with your coworkers. You're not separated by, like, three different floors. You're all in the same office. You're all kind of seeing each other on a day to day basis, and I think that does a lot, to kind of in the team working atmosphere, if you will. Every lawyer has their own clients, but there are cases where more than one lawyer is working on. There are
Yeah.
cases where multiple staff members are helping out on, and so to kind of have everyone all near each other, I think it's very helpful. But also in terms of choosing on what cases to take, what clients to take, what not to do, running conflicts. These are all things that are, um, things that firms of all types have to deal with. But kind of going back to your, part of your original question is, I've, I've been practicing since 2012. So coming out of law school, I practiced on plaintiff side litigation, which are plaintiffs, in short, are the people that bring lawsuits for a variety of different harms and damages. Again, whether that be, in the injury space, or whether it's a, business tort, or some, business deal gone wrong, whatever else, that's plaintiff side litigation. encompasses a lot more things. However, I worked doing plaintiff side litigation for a number of years. Working up cases, litigating them, being part of several trial teams, working on appeals. And then I briefly switched to defense side litigation. From the company perspective, these are companies that are being sued by a number of different plaintiffs, and the perspective on that side is invaluable. Just to kind of see it from both sides, it you see it through a different prism, and it's I've gone back to plaintiff side, and that perspective has been incredibly valuable.
Was that a conscious decision to work both sides like that in your career to get sort of
You know,
perspective on both sides?
I don't think it was always something that I wanted, but I knew that it could happen. I think that diverse experience really help you develop as a lawyer, seeing different things. Just like I talked earlier in terms of litigation, I do a lot of different types of cases, and um, just kind of continually adding to that knowledge and adding to that that knowledge base, if you will, um, is important to allow me to represent my clients. And currently, it it is something that is incorporated into how I practice. I mean, I've always been, and when I say always, I grew up a shy kid that was very nerdy and soft spoken, and I didn't break out of that shell until college. And I truly didn't break out of the shell completely until law school when I joined mock trial. But you're in a situation where you're I've been an aggressive litigator most of my career, and to be able to kind of problem solve and expect what the other side's going to do, I've always been able to do that. But also, having been on the other side now, um, I know certain ways to view cases and to evaluate exposure for the other side, and it's just something that's incorporated into what I do.
You have mentioned uh, mentoring and giving back to the community earlier. I've read that you are really into mentorship, giving back to the community. When I think about those things, it's not inherent in the Vietnamese culture, and I don't know where it comes from, but just gonna go out on a limb and say we have this thing called yonghe, which is hiding the trade, hiding the secrets, the trade secrets. We, as a culture, we don't really believe that the master should give the student everything. But it's different in American culture. And I'm starting to explore this whole idea with Vietnamese professionals that idea of giving back, whether it's in the entertainment business, being a mentor to artists that are starting out, it's a big thing. And now I'm hearing from you as a lawyer, mentoring and giving back is a big thing. Why do you think that giving back and not giving away or giving away everything is important for you and for the work that you do?
Well, I do think mentorship is incredibly important, and I think about that for a lot of reasons. Is that I've had great mentors that have been a great sounding board for me over the years, and it's helped me in my career, and it's my way of paying it forward and doing what I can to give back. I like seeing other people succeed. I want our people to succeed. I want Vietnamese Americans to succeed at every level. I think we are hardworking, we are intelligent, we're industrious, we just knowing how many people came over here after the Vietnam War with nothing, and how they managed to, put their head down, work hard, and provide living for their families. is incredible, especially when you think of the language barrier. If you think about the lack of resources, and it's not just lack of resources in terms of money; it's in terms of people.
Yeah.
You come over here, I mean, they're Vietnamese all over the U.S., right? But at the time they were coming here, it's not like right now you can just call someone up on the phone and ask for their advice or a job lead or something. You're coming over here, you're settling down, and I'm so I admire so much the older Vietnamese generation for coming over here, working hard, and doing whatever it took for the younger generation to try to succeed. And that's something that I don't think we can ever pay back, ever. And um, that's not lost on me, you know? And so it's one of those things where, our ancestors didn't come over here, just for us to succeed, just for us. It's for future generations to succeed as well. And so I think it's important to always share that knowledge, mentor whoever I can, and you know, do what I can to give at least a small piece back.
Yeah.
I know I'm just one person, but if I can do my part, it may be small, but it may encourage other people to do it. Um, and it's kind of a cascading effect, right? If I mentor one or two people or five people, hopefully they end up, paying it forward down the line as well. So it's one of those things where I think that for me, it's never been about I'm going to get somewhere and then just not help anyone else. That's not how I was raised. I'm very close to my family. I'm very close to my parents. I owe them everything. I wouldn't be where I am without them. Um, and it's something where, you know, I don't view it as an obligation. I view it more as recognizing, how blessed I've been and how fortunate I've been in terms of having such, amazing people come before me. And I think it's just something that we should do.
Right. Have you been to Vietnam?
I've not. Um, I'm going to try to go later this year. Um, I've not visited. Um, I've been talking with my cousins about taking a trip back there or to there later this year.
Because you were born here,
Um,
right?
I was born here in Houston, and um, we we talk, to our family over in Vietnam semi regularly, whether it be through Facebook Messenger or text or we send packages, we send clothes, and we send everything back as well. There's certain you know health circumstances for my parents wise in terms of I've been wanting to take them back, and it's it's been a little difficult in the past few years, but it's been something that's been a long time coming,
Yeah.
and um, it is something that is something that I am going to do, and I think I'm going to do it later this year, probably in the winter, and if not, the beginning of next year.
What do you expect when you get there? What do you expect to see? What do you expect to feel?
Um, you know, it's so crazy because I've heard it's changed so much. I've heard it's changed so much, yet still remain the same in a lot of ways, and so I'm just excited to see the country, knowing that a lot of things have changed, but also to see my family friends over there. Um, you know how it is in Asian culture. I mean, if your parents or your grandparents grew up with certain people, even if they're not blood related, they're pretty much your cousins or close family friend, right, for life. So everyone's kids or your cousins, or I don't even know what the terminology would be to call them, but I'm excited to see everyone over there. And um, I I don't really know what to expect, but I think it would be great just catching up. I mean, family is really important to me, and most of our families over here in the United States. You know, we have family. My aunt, uncle are in Canada, cousins in Canada, cousins in throughout Texas, California. But you know, we have close family friends in Vietnam, and they're people that you know similar. Like their kids know of me because their parents are telling them, like, I grew up with Chukwo and Gokim, and my parents are telling me like, hey, that's uh, Gohang's, daughter or
Yeah.
Gohang's son or whatever else, and like so it's we know each other in that kind of in that kind of way, but I think it'll be really cool to kind of all catch up in person and
Yeah, it's interesting that I asked you about your sort of expectations, and really what you just 100% of your answer has everything to do with people. It's not like, oh, the countryside, or oh, the buildings, or oh, I can't wait to see, something
yeah,
physical. It's really the way you answered it is very telling about what you expect. You expect to be a part of the people, and I really like that answer. It shows me that this is what's on your mind. It's the people that you can't wait to see. Um, I have a question about developing countries, whether it's Vietnam or any other country.
right.
The legal um, the legal infrastructure of a developing country that becomes, you know, a Taiwan or a Singapore in the next 20 years. What kind of legal subcategories are sort of like that? Does these legal subcategories take precedence over another? Sort of like criminal law is at the top, and then marital, and then corporate. Like, how does this all work out when we're thinking about a developing country?
Right. That's a great question. I think the criminal justice system would- for a developing country would be essential to have a functioning, well-run criminal justice system. And the reason I say that is, you know, let me just kind of break it down from at least my perspective, is that I believe that you have to have a criminal justice system in place that, that is fair, equitable, and it's something that the citizens have faith in and trust in, especially for a developing country. You have individuals, I imagine, that are going to want a clear understanding of what's right and wrong, and whether and also have consequences and punishments that are proportional to the crime. Right? I don't think there's, you know, what you have is you have some countries that have widely different ways that they approach criminal law. And I think establishing a criminal justice system that the people have faith in is so important. And so you have to have good criminal defense attorneys that know the law and, you know, can protect the people in terms of if the government overreaches or if, there's some, you know, absurd, you know, uh, interpretation of some law that someone's, you know, gone astray of or whatever else. I mean, you have to have good criminal defense attorneys that can protect the interests of the people. And in that same vein, you have to have prosecutors that are following the law, that are not coloring outside the lines, that are also trying to do what they can to keep society intact. Right? There's a need for both sides. I've never been the type of attorney, even in the civil field. I've never been the type of attorney that just says, you know what, all defense attorneys are the analogy that a lot of people use are good, evil, dark, light.
Yeah.
It's not like a serious analogy, but people always think that the side that they're on is the only side that is the just side. But I view it as there's a need for good people on both sides, because there are going to be times where, companies are accused of wrongs that they didn't do, right? There's times that people are accused of things that they didn't do. There are times that, people are prosecuting crimes that did occur and that need to be prosecuted. And there are people that are bringing claims that where a substantial injury did occur, or that, something was breached, and people need to be held accountable. So you have all those situations where you need good people on both sides to represent those interests. And in a society that's developing, you have to have a system in place that where there's confidence, what is supposed to happen is happening. Like, people that are hurting society and hurting other people, absolutely, they need to be punished for it. Now, what is that punishment? I don't know. But, you have to have people that are willing to put those people away. But then you have people that are either that didn't do it, or, where the punishment is far greater than the crime. So you have to have people advocating on their behalf, that are skilled to be able to navigate through those issues. So I think, and again, hopefully I answered your question, but I think, criminal law is so important to developing country, knowing that it's still a problem in developed
Yeah,
countries.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah,
Even here in
it
the
is still.
US, we have a
Yeah,
massive problem with this.
yeah. We here in the U.S. 10 years ago, and actually, it's still happening. People are still being incarcerated for marijuana
Yeah.
possession, right? And it is something that, I mean, you now have companies that are IPOing on it.
Yeah.
You have corporations that are making money off it, whereas there are people that are still in
Still sit
jail.
in jail. Yeah, it's the irony of it.
Yeah. So, and so you have inequities in criminal justice systems everywhere, not just here, but in other countries. I mean, we hear about it. I try to keep up with the news around the world. And I know there's things I'm not going to catch, but I try to at least have like a knowledge base of what's going on in the world. And I know that a lot of countries are, you know, they have antiquated laws. They have antiquated viewpoints on what is, you know, right and wrong. And, and that's probably a whole nother discussion for a
Yeah.
later time. But, I think that, there has to be balance. Obviously it can't be something where it's the Wild West where people can get away with whatever they want, because you don't want that. You have to have, prosecutors in place, government in place, police that can kind of keep a hold in that situation. But you got to have people on the other side that are willing to check those people if they go out of bounds. So I think that interplay is extremely important. There are good cops and there are bad cops. There are good prosecutors, there are bad prosecutors. There's good defense attorneys, there's bad defense attorneys. There are good people that were accused of a crime that didn't do it, and there are bad people that were accused of crime that did do it, right? So knowing all those things, you have to have a system that where more times than not that people are getting it right, and not just more times than not, but as much as possible, people are getting it right.
Yeah. That brings me to the work that you're about to get into. This is actually why I wanted to have you on today. Is you're starting a podcast with Michelle Phan, right?
Yes, my friend Michelle, she's a corporate attorney in Seattle. We grew up together in Houston. She's very accomplished, very sharp, and it is a project that we've been talking about for a while, and we're very excited about it. It's a podcast called Asians in Law, and it's something where we're going to have a dialogue with Asian American law professionals, and that can mean people that are practicing attorneys, that can mean judges, that can mean people that have taken their law degree and are no longer practicing law, but are applying it in some different field, whether it be business or something else. And so the purpose is really to well, the purpose is multifold, which is one, to highlight Asian American legal professionals that are doing big things all across the country. You know, we're not limited here to just Texas or Seattle. We're going to talk to people all across, but also using that platform, discuss important issues such as mentorship, um, deciding what field of law is the right fit. Once you're in the law, how to develop your career, um, how to practice in the courtroom. There's so many different topics that we're going to touch on, and it's part of, again, like we've talked about, it's part of trying to not only amplify Asian American voices, but also to help answer questions, or like we call it, demystifying the process for people that may be interested in the law. Like if you're a high school graduate that's going into law or going into college and deciding what you want to do, um, some of these episodes can answer some of those questions. Or if you're a college student that's kind of on the fence, same thing. Or if you're a first year law student that doesn't know which field of law you want to go into, hopefully there's a nugget or two in there that can provide some use to you. But at the end of the day, it's something that is a passion project for us that, we've recorded episodes already with some, I mean, just very good people. And when I say good people, I mean just at the core, people that are going to take their time out and try to impart some knowledge to the listeners. And also, these are people that are very accomplished and are at very high levels in their company or sitting on the bench. So we're excited, and hopefully they'll officially roll out next month.
I have partners that a few partners that are big fans of Michelle. Can you tell me a little bit about her? Growing
Yeah,
up with her in Houston.
yeah. So same thing. She's her parents are immigrants. Yeah, her family actually. We're family friends growing up. We're also friends ourselves, and um, we've taken different paths. I stayed in Texas for undergrad and for law school. I went to UT and then I went back to Houston. She's gone around. Obviously, right now she's practicing in Seattle, and so she represents a lot of individuals and companies, and in a wide array of matters. She does a lot of intellectual property, and she does general litigation as well. So actually, we've had the opportunity to actually work on cases together as well. Uh, I don't practice intellectual property. I do practice business law. There is some intersection between those two things. If you represent companies that are eventually going to have, you know, intellectual property disputes, and so that's something where we've had the opportunity to work together on some cases. But going back to what she does, I mean, she represents her clients very well, and it's something where she has a broad client base that trusts her for a lot of matters, and she's in the courtroom in and out. So something that, in terms of accolades, it's just going to keep coming for her. She's gotten a lot already, and it's not going to stop.
Why is it important to do something like this right now?
Um, I think for a lot of reasons. I'm a big believer on, if you want something to happen, you got to get off the ground. You got to take that first step. If you keep pushing it off, saying, I'll do it next year, I'll do it next year, it's never going to start. Just like with your podcast, like it took you getting up one day and saying, you know what, I'm going to record my first episode. I'm going to write the questions, or I'm going to, have the game plan on what I'm going to do. Right. So again, it's something where Michelle and I both feel like there needs to be more Asian voices
Yes.
in this industry, but also, you know, we want to touch as many people as we can in terms of, if there are people that are going to be listening to us, we hope that they'll take something away from it. Whether they're listening to it for fun or whether some family member or friend of theirs can take something away from it, we wanted to just get started on it. We're at the point in our career where we have very busy schedules, but you know, I'll lose a little bit of sleep. That's fine. You know, I want to keep myself busy because I think it's important to keep busy, and it's important to spend a little bit of time on these things on the side to do what we can to further Asian American representation, um, and just kind of give back. I know she's had mentors as well. I've had several, and going back to that whole mentorship discussion and interplay, we are. It's kind of our way of doing something for others.
When I think about Asians in law, I think of lawyers. I think of the people that you mentioned, former lawyers that go into business, but there probably is a lot more that I'm not seeing. And you just touched on a few things, but judges um, and people that are, again, like what I'm not seeing. What are some of the angles and sort of the worlds that you're going to kind of approach in the legal world as it refers to Asian Americans?
Well, I think that I think that right now, um, and a lot of Asian Americans may not know this, but there is not nearly enough Asian representation on the bench in the judiciary. Excuse me. One of our guests in the podcast, Judge Weems, is the first Asian American in Houston to sit on a civil bench. That's that's shocking. We live in Houston. We have a huge Vietnamese population. Um, it's so large to the point where, and this will probably shock you, but in the parking meters in downtown, when you're paying for the parking meter, there's three languages that you can get your display options in: English, Spanish, and Vietnamese.
Wow.
We are in a city with so many Vietnamese people. It's not even just Vietnamese. We have so many Asian minorities of all different races, right? From all different countries. You know, how is it that she's the first one on a civil district court bench? We have another Asian American on the criminal district court here in Houston, and they were voted in at the same time in the same year, a few years ago. But it's something that I don't think people truly grasp. I mean, I can name on one hand, and part of this may be that I'm not going to know every Asian American that holds a government office in the U.S. I don't think anyone can name that. But in terms of the U.S. representatives or the senators, in Congress, there's not many. I mean, you're going to think of what people running for office like Andrew Yang, okay, Congressman Ted Lieu, okay, that's another one. Kamala Harris, that's one. I know over the years Louisiana has had Asian American representation.
Joseph Cow, I think.
Yeah.
But it's very, very rare.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at the backgrounds of most U.S. Politicians, they have a law background for the most part.
Yeah, I think one of the things is that, you know, we as and this is going to be an overgeneralization, but growing up, and I feel like I can say it because I grew up like that. I grew up very timid, shy. You're taught to respect others, to kind of you know be compliant, if you will. Don't break any rules. Live a very structured day to day life. And I feel like you know we need to be aggressive. We need to speak out about issues. If you have a platform and there are injustices happening in the world, speak out about them, right? Um, you know, Run for office, apply to grad school, or apply for that job that you don't think you're going to get. You know, let your voice be heard in the workplace. Don't just go in and out every day and not say anything and have people overlook your existence, right? Whatever field you're in, it doesn't matter. As Asian Americans, we are, we bring so much to the table. And I don't, and certainly, but when I say that, I don't mean that we're better than anyone else. I don't mean that at all. I mean, I think we're all, one people, right? We're all human, but it's important for people to understand that, um, you know, we're not just that. The stereotypes are, we're not just put us in the back room and we'll do, um, a good accounting for you. We're good at math, or we're just going to put our head down and not talk and just do everything that's given, and never do more, or not speak out and things like that. And I feel like we have to continue. There's so many Asian Americans pushing the envelope right now, and whether that's in law, in government, in the charitable space, or kind of in the philanthropy space. There are so many people that are doing such great jobs. I mean, I can't even name them all. I mean, just there
Yeah.
are people that are making our community proud out there every time they do something. And we have the capability to put so many more people on that playing field. And so these small things, like, you and I on this podcast, um, me and Michelle, Michelle and I's, later on, it's one of those things where it's just more chances for more voices to get into the mix that hopefully resonates with people, and makes them want to do more, right? And do more doesn't necessarily mean, like, again, like, it could be whatever field you're in, but the point is to do things outside of work. Like, you're not just confined to what you do as a living. You can be involved in your community outside of work. You can take on extra responsibilities outside of work. You can try to effectuate change in your community outside of work. And those are things that I think we've gotten so much better at over the years, but we need to continue in that direction and building that momentum.
As I'm talking with you in the last hour, I think that somebody like you have a lot of confidence, and you come off as you're very sure-footed. I don't see you having sort of this um, struggle when I think about you in your professional life. But I can imagine that Asians in law might face some sort of ceiling, some sort of discrimination. Do you feel like, for the most part, that Asians in law have a fair shot? Asian professionals in law, Vietnamese professionals in law, has a fair shot throughout the country, the US, of getting promoted and moving, getting that upward mobility? in their careers?
Um, in terms of just exposure for the podcast, I think that we have a good shot. Obviously, no one has a crystal ball. Can't tell you how it's going to turn out. But
Oh, I meant that both actual Asians in law, not the actual podcast. I think the podcast is going to do great. I can see where it's going, but actually mean like Asian Americans in law. Do you
you know,
think that?
I think more and more people are going in. The numbers have continued to rise over the years, even though they're very small. But I think just as time passes, I think people will see people get inspired by people, right? Like for example, there's a Texas Supreme Court Justice, Eva Guzman, very well respected, someone that a lot of people look up to in the minority community, not only Hispanics. I think she's great. When you have the younger generation thinking there's someone out there moving and shaking things, it's inspirational, right?
Hmm.
Um, just like right now, I'm sure Andrew Yang is inspiring a lot of people. Not only, I mean, he's obviously had a start in the tech space, but also in the political space, right? And so it's the same thing in terms of if you have, someone become a Supreme Court justice, or if someone becomes a attorney general who does some big case, or if someone becomes lieutenant governor somewhere. I mean, it's like a cascading effect. The more you have people in those type of positions, people start to see it's actually possible to
Yeah.
get into that field, but not only that, for there not to be a ceiling. Because for a young teenager or a young student right now who's surveying the landscape and they see, you know what, there are Asian Americans making partner at Jones Day, at Aiken Gum, at um, Baker McKenzie, at mid-sized firms, at boutique firms, starting their own firms and killing it. I have friends that have started their own firms and are just doing so many big things. Whether it be verdicts and settlements, or just the type of cases that they're advocating for people on. And again, it's if you're a young person, just like when we were kids, right? If Well, not even when we're kids, even just years ago, right? Anytime you want to do something, you look at the landscape to see, is it actually possible for me to succeed in this landscape, right?
Yeah.
And it's a it's a big deal when you look and you see, oh, you know what? There's another Asian businessman in this space that has done well. There's another Asian podcaster. There's another Asian person in government. There's another Asian, you know, project manager for a construction company. All those things. Like the more we permeate the industry, now I'm talking about the legal practice, people will start looking around and seeing, you know, it's possible. Now, I guarantee you, without even knowing numbers, just talking common sense wise, if you go to a firm's website, you're going to see more diverse photos than you've ever seen, in the last
Yeah.
5 years or 10 years. There, people of color are increasingly being elevated, rightfully so, to more leadership positions and more positions where they have a chance to do bigger things. And they're paving the way. There are Asian lawyers that came before me. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, just because I'm paying it forward means that I have all the knowledge in the world. I don't. But that's the thing, is that you don't have to have all that knowledge to try to start paying it forward. You can start paying it forward any time in your career.
Yeah.
And there are extremely successful Asian American lawyers in Houston that are older than me that are paving the way for all us younger ones, you know? So that's something that um, I've thought about a lot. And again, to whatever I can do my part to build that momentum and keep it going, I'll do.
Andrew, I hope that in the future I can get both you and Michelle on with me and sit and discuss something that, will be happening in the future, especially as it relates to Asians in law and your podcast. And maybe next year, the end of this year, the three of us can sit and have a conversation about, the podcast and the legal world as it pertains to our story. Um,
Yeah, we can definitely do that.
yeah. Thank you so much for sharing and opening up today. I learned a lot, and the insight that you provide is it's hopeful. And I think that we need more representation and more, I mean, literally more representation by Asians in the law profession.
Yeah, and Kenneth, thank you for having me, and thank you for doing what you do as well. You know, you're out there, you're trying to make a difference and amplify, Asian American voices, and really trying to get to the core of, how it affects the Vietnamese community and what we can do to continue to advance our community. And so I respect what you do, and I appreciate what you do, and I look forward to our next discussion.
Yeah, and I hope hopefully next time we sit down, I can hear your thoughts on Vietnam. I think that would be very exciting.
I'll be happy to share that.
Wonderful. Have a wonderful day, and we will talk soon. Thanks again.
Thank you, Ken.
All right.